The Russians have plans for further military exploitation of Belarusian territory. This was stated today by Volodymyr Zelensky after a report by the head of Ukraine's foreign intelligence service, Oleg Ivashchenko. Zelensky noted that at this stage, Ukraine will not make this information public. However, partners who may be threatened by this will be warned. Dozens of pieces of equipment and hundreds of soldiers. More than half of NATO member states will join the procurement of American weapons for Ukraine under the PURL initiative. This was announced by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Sweden, Estonia and Finland have also pledged to contribute to this fund. The PURL system has been in operation since August of this year, as Washington now refuses to simply hand over weapons to Ukraine and instead demands payment from its partners. NATO allies also discussed today how to create a drone wall to counter Russia. They want to launch the new drone defense system by the end of 2027. And Germany has taken the initiative to create such an EU air defense shield. The local defense minister Boris Pistorius announced that they will invest 10 billion euros in all types of UAVs. In addition, during today's North Atlantic Alliance meeting, the Czech side revealed details of its initiative to provide Ukraine with ammunition. Defense Minister Jana Chernochova reported that foreign donors have provided $4.5 billion for this project. With this money, they managed to organize the supply of 3,700,000 artillery shells for the Ukrainian army. Despite these figures, analysts from the Kiel Institute for the World Economy report that military aid to Kyiv in July and August dropped by 43% compared to the first half of the year. More details about the NATO meeting and their new security priorities in a report from Brussels at the Alliance headquarters by Radio Svoboda correspondent Zoriana Stepanenko.
There is a lot of talk at NATO headquarters about American Tomahawks, which, if they appear in Ukraine, would in some way unlock a new level of support from its allies. First and foremost, these discussions are among journalists. European ministers respond to them by saying they will support any decision that strengthens Ukraine's long-range capabilities. It is believed that these very long-range capabilities will influence the course of the war. However, Secretary General Rutte made it clear, as expected, that the ministers of the allied countries would not be discussing Tomahawks here, saying, "This is a matter for the United States and Ukraine." But assistance to Ukraine remains a constant item on the agenda of the alliance countries. Among the key directions is the relatively new PURL initiative, which involves other NATO allies purchasing American weapons for Ukraine. The head of the Pentagon expects that more countries will plan purchases of weapons on the American market, and that these decisions will be directly linked to achieving peace in Ukraine.
The commitments will soon be transformed into capabilities, which is the most important aspect, and one of its components, of course, is PURL. If there's one thing we learned during President Trump's term, it's the active use of force to achieve peace. Peace is achieved through strength, not loud words or finger-pointing threats. It is achieved through strength when you have strong and real capabilities that are respected by your adversaries.
Currently, 13 countries have purchased or are planning to purchase aid packages for Ukraine under this initiative. Today, Finland joined this list. Its Minister of Defense announced the corresponding intention to journalists. Why American weapons? First, the European defense industry has not increased its production capacity to a scale that would meet Ukraine's needs. Second, it is the American arsenal that contains weapons with no counterparts in terms of effectiveness. At least that's how Ukraine's ambassador to NATO explained it to us. Her delegation, led by Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal, is persuading partners here to take an active role, and the Secretary General of the Alliance is optimistic about this.
There is every good reason to firmly believe today that many other sovereign countries will certainly sign on to this extremely important and vital assistance, including advanced air defense systems and, in particular, crucial interceptor missiles, which are absolutely essential for Ukraine to ensure the maximum possible protection of its civilian population and critical vital infrastructure from constant and relentless Russian attacks.
Some countries have already announced new military aid packages for Ukraine today. The Netherlands is investing $90 million in drone production in Ukraine. There is unused capacity there. Estonia is also providing a batch of drones. However, the defense minister of this Baltic country also emphasizes a worrying trend, the decrease in the volume of military aid to Ukraine. Rutte did not agree with this statement. Our sources in diplomatic circles within the alliance point out that the purchase of American weapons for Ukraine began in the middle of the budget year and suggest that this may have affected what some consider to be the slow pace of investment. The countries have already planned all their expenditures for this year. They will soon start planning for the next year so they can allocate resources for Ukraine's needs as well. All the more so because the outcome of the war there will determine whether there will be peace in Europe. Today, many NATO country ministers emphasize this point. From Brussels, Zoriana Stepanenko, Marek Hajduk, Radio Liberty, especially for TSN 1+1.
A serious blow to the heart of Putin's war financing. The United Kingdom has imposed some of the toughest sanctions against the Kremlin's energy sector. 91 legal entities and individuals were added to the list of restrictions, including the largest oil companies Rosneft and Lukoil. Also targeted by the sanctions are 51 vessels linked to the so-called shadow fleet of the Kremlin, a number of banks, and the Russian national payment card system. As explained by the British government, everyone who has come under their economic restrictions has helped fuel the Russian war machine. For example, the companies Rosneft and Lukoil together export more than 3 million barrels of oil every day. It is noteworthy that all these measures coincide with the start of Russian Energy Week in Moscow, which undermines Putin's efforts to promote his main source of funding in the world. As a result of Russian shelling, emergency power outage schedules were introduced in the morning in the Dnipropetrovsk region. At night, critical infrastructure in several districts came under enemy fire. In the Chernihiv region, restoration work is still ongoing after previous shelling. And there are also partial power outages there, and emergency shutdowns are being implemented in Sumy and Cherkasy regions as well. At the moment, there is no information on how long they will last. Ukrenergo is asking people to reduce their use of electrical appliances whenever possible, and this request applies to all of Ukraine. 3 districts of Kyiv were without electricity last night. Even more Kyiv residents are without water. All of this is due to overloaded power grids. Around 1 in the morning, energy workers reported that they had fixed the damage, so the supply of resources is being restored. What happened is a technical malfunction, which also occurred during peacetime, says acting head of the State Energy Supervision Inspectorate, Anatoly Zamovko. And he asked Ukrainians to be understanding about the temporary difficulties, because in addition to the shelling, the work of energy workers is now also complicated by the cold weather and increased load on the power system.
Right now, we're saying that restrictions have been practically lifted across almost the entire territory, except, let's say, for Chernihiv region, where we still have scheduled hourly outages because previous strikes hit critical energy infrastructure, which is currently being repaired. Obviously, this should also include certain charging devices. Clearly, there should also be some preparations for insulating both the premises and oneself because, well, there's only one way out of this situation. We have to take care of ourselves, ensure our own safety, and look after our own capabilities.
And now about the light that came in handy during total darkness. Kyiv resident Violeta Tereshchenko, after the power outage, posted a photo of a ring in a box that has a built-in light. It turned out that her boyfriend Artem proposed to her and gave her this box, which became the only source of light in the apartment. This story gathered thousands of likes and reposts. Social media users write, "Love is the brightest light." Give this episode a like as well, so you'll always stay up to date with the information prepared by TSN. And let us know in the comments what you think of this story. And now let's move on